The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council stretched high above the gathered delegates, its walls pulsing with a soft blue light that seemed to breathe with the tension in the room. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had assembled for this emergency session, their varied forms creating a tapestry of alien life that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. At the center of it all stood Admiral Kunjo of the Hegemony War Council, his towering figure commanding attention. His three eyes, each a different shade of amber, blazed with the fire of absolute conviction as he surveyed the assembly. His scaled skin reflected the chamber's light, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of military authority that had conquered dozens of worlds. "Fellow delegates," Kyungjo began, his words echoing off the crystalline walls like thunder. "We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The human infestation has spread far beyond what we deemed acceptable. Their primitive vessels now patrol 17 star systems, and their breeding colonies multiply like a plague across the outer rim." The chamber stirred with nervous energy. Delegates whispered among themselves in languages that ranged from melodic chimes to guttural growls. The Zentheri delegation, with their translucent blue skin and 6 arms, gestured frantically to each other. The rock-like Korvaxians rumbled their disapproval, their massive forms shaking the floor beneath them. 3 years ago, Kyunho continued, raising his voice above the murmurs,
"Out!"
"When our scouts first discovered this backwater planet called Earth, we thought we had found another primitive species to catalog and forget. How wrong we were." He activated a holographic display that materialized. Above the chamber's center, the image showed a small blue-green world spinning slowly in space, looking peaceful and insignificant. But as the display zoomed out, red dots began appearing around it, spreading like an infection through the star map. "Look at this spread." Kyungho's claws clicked against the podium as he pointed at the display. "Most species we encounter take centuries to develop basic space travel. The Vorlok Empire needed 800 years to reach their nearest star. The Crystalline Collective required a full millennium. But these humans, these impossibly adaptable creatures, achieved faster-than-light travel within decades of our first contact." The red dots on the display pulsed ominously, each one representing a human outpost or colony. The spread was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, chaotic and unpredictable. Like spores carried on an interstellar wind, Delegate Minesio of the Inner Worlds leaned forward in her hoverchair, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Admiral, surely you exaggerate. No species develops that quickly, do I?" Kyungho's laugh was bitter. "Our intelligence reports show human settlements on worlds we considered uninhabitable. They've established mining operations in asteroid fields that would crush our strongest ships. They've built cities on planets with toxic atmospheres and somehow made them thrive." The display shifted to show images of human colonies. There were domed cities on airless moons, underwater facilities in crushing ocean depths, and sprawling settlements on worlds with gravity that should have flattened human bones. Yet in every image, humans moved about their business as if these impossible conditions were perfectly normal. "Their technology is crude," Kyungho admitted, "but it's effective in ways that defy our understanding. They build ships from salvaged materials that somehow outperform our finest engineering. They modify their own biology to survive in environments that would kill most of us instantly. And worst of all, they reproduce at an alarming rate." Chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every delegate understood the mathematics of expansion. In the galaxy's delicate balance of power, rapid growth meant territorial disputes, resource conflicts, and war. "The solution is elegantly simple," Kyungho declared, his voice rising to fill the chamber. "A swift, decisive strike against their homeworld. Our intelligence confirms that Earth remains their primary population center. Destroy it, and we eliminate the threat before it spreads further." Seconded. The voice belonged to Delegate Wu Jin from the Outer Rim territories, his insectoid features clicking with approval. "These humans are unpredictable. Their expansion patterns follow no logical progression. They establish colonies and systems that make no strategic sense, then somehow make them profitable. Better to end this now before they become truly dangerous. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber like waves. The hegemony had brought peace to the galaxy through strength, and most delegates had grown comfortable with their methods. When a species became problematic, a hegemony dealt with it swiftly and permanently. But from the observation deck, a lone figure rose with quiet dignity. Delegate Hay, one of the Galactic Observation Corps, stood slowly, her silver hair catching the chamber's light like starfire. She was older than most delegates, her face marked by years of studying the galaxy's countless species. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of experience. "I request permission to present counter-evidence," she said, her words cutting through the chamber's noise like a blade. "I have spent 2 years studying these humans in detail. What Admiral Kyung-ho proposes is not just wrong, it is suicidal." The chamber fell silent as if someone had switched off the air recyclers. Every eye, sensor, and sensory organ focused on the small figure standing calmly in the observation deck. Kyung-ho's expression darkened, his scales shifting to a deeper shade of amber. "Delegate Haewon, your sympathy for lesser species is well known throughout the galaxy. But sentiment cannot override strategic necessity." "This is not sentiment," Haewon replied, her voice steady as bedrock. "This is survival. Grant me one." Session 2. Present my evidence. If my data does not convince this assembly, I will personally support the invasion. The offer sent shockwaves through the chamber. Haewon was known for her pacifist views, her belief that every species deserved the chance to develop naturally. For her to offer support for military action meant she had discovered something truly significant. The Supreme Chancellor, an ancient being whose true form was hidden within swirling robes of energy, spoke for the first time. His voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the wisdom of eons. "The request is unprecedented," the Chancellor mused. "But delegate, Haewon's research has proven valuable in the past." "Very well, you have 1 galactic standard day to present your case." As the session adjourned, delegates began filing out of the chamber in groups, their conversations animated and urgent. The hegemony faction clustered around Kyunjo while the more cautious species gathered near the exits. Clearly disturbed by the proceedings, Kyung-ho approached Haewon as she descended from the observation deck, his predatory smile revealing rows of sharp teeth. "You're wasting everyone's time, old friend. These humans are nothing special. They're just another species that got lucky with technology." Haewon met his gaze steadily, her expression calm but resolute. "That's exactly what makes them dangerous, Kyung-ho. They're not special. They're not chosen. They're not blessed by some cosmic force. They're just determined, and that determination is going to reshape everything we think we know about galactic civilization." As they parted ways, neither could have imagined how prophetic those words would prove to be. The following day, the crystalline chamber buzzed with anticipation as delegates filed back into their seats. Word had spread throughout the station about Haewon's bold challenge, and even representatives who rarely attended emergency sessions had come to witness. What many expected to be a spectacular failure, Haewon stood at the center of the chamber, her presentation crystal hovering beside her like a loyal companion. The device pulsed with stored data, its surface reflecting the nervous energy that filled the room. Behind her, the chamber's massive walls had been configured to display 3-dimensional holograms, creating an immersive theater that could transport the audience to any corner of the galaxy. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "What I am about to show you will challenge everything we believe about warfare, survival, and the nature of intelligent life itself." The lights dimmed, and the first hologram materialized above the assembly. It showed a small asteroid mining station floating in the void of space, its industrial lights twinkling like stars against the darkness. The facility looked peaceful, almost quaint, with its rotating habitation modules and sprawling mining equipment. "Mining Station Gamma 7, Haewon announced. 6 months ago, this human outpost was attacked by void pirates. Watch carefully." The hologram came alive with motion. 3 sleek pirate vessels emerged from hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons. They moved with the practiced efficiency of predators, surrounding the mining station and opening fire without warning. The station's minimal defenses lasted mere minutes before being overwhelmed. As expected, HFY narrated, the human defenders were quickly overwhelmed. Any reasonable species would have surrendered at this point. But on the hologram, something extraordinary was happening. Instead of raising white flags or broadcasting surrender messages, the humans began moving with frantic purpose. Workers in environmental suits swarmed over the mining equipment, their movements coordinated despite the chaos. "Watch this," HFY said, highlighting one section of the display. "They're removing excavation charges from the mining drills." The delegates leaned forward as human workers carefully extracted the powerful explosive charges used to break apart asteroids. But instead of hiding them, they were mounting them on maintenance drones. "Impossible," muttered Delegate Yansu from the Merchant Guild. "Those charges aren't designed for combat." "No," HFY agreed, "but humans don't seem to care about design limitations." The hologram showed the improvised missiles streaking toward the pirate ships. The pirates, caught off guard by this unexpected counterattack, scrambled to adjust their tactics. But the humans weren't finished. "Now observe." The industrial mechs. HFY directed their attention to massive construction robots designed for asteroid mining. They're not built for combat, but watch what happens when humans operate them. The mining mechs, normally slow and cumbersome, suddenly moved with deadly purpose. Their massive drilling arms tore through pirate boarding parties, while their industrial cutters sliced through enemy equipment like paper. One mech grabbed a pirate fighter and literally threw it into another vessel, causing both to explode in a brilliant fireball. "They lost the battle," HFY said, as the hologram showed the mining station finally succumbing to the assault. "But they took 70% of the pirate force with them, using nothing but mining tools." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Delegate Sungmin from the Trade Federation stood up, his forearms gesturing dismissively. "Desperate animals fighting for survival, nothing more. Any species will fight viciously when cornered." "Will they?" HFY's smile was enigmatic. "Let me show you something else." The hologram shifted to show a refugee camp on a barren world. Prefabricated shelters stretched to the horizon, housing thousands of displaced beings from a dozen different species. The scene was one of barely controlled chaos, with long lines of hungry refugees waiting for food distribution. "Refugee Camp Delta 12, HFY explained. "A famine struck this world, threatening both human and Zeltharian populations. Standard galactic protocol suggests dividing rations by species priority, with the stronger species receiving preference to maximize survival chances." The hologram zoomed in on the distribution center, where human aid workers were handing out food packages. So something was wrong with the scene. The humans weren't keeping the larger portions for themselves. "Look closely," HFY said, her voice soft with wonder. "Humans are giving their own food to starving alien children." The delegates watched in stunned silence as human workers, themselves thin from hunger, carefully distributed the best rations to young Zeltharians, insectoid creatures whose dietary needs were completely different from human requirements. "This makes no evolutionary sense," whispered Delegate Chongwu from the Scientific Council. "They're risking their own survival for beings they share no genetic connection with." "It gets more interesting," HFY continued. The hologram fast-forwarded, showing the same humans working around the clock to construct hydroponic gardens. They modified their own technology to support alien plant life, creating growing systems that could feed species with completely different nutritional needs. Within 3 weeks, HFY announced the camp was producing surplus food. It's not just for humans, but for every species present. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't the actions of a desperate species fighting for survival. These were the actions of beings who put principles above self-preservation. Admiral Kung Ho stood abruptly, scales shifting to a darker shade of amber. "Emotional weakness," he declared. "This proves my point. They're too sentimental too. Be effective warriors. It will make them easier to defeat." "Will it?" HFY's next sequence showed the aftermath of the refugee camp. The hologram revealed dozens of alien species working alongside human crews across multiple star systems. Former refugees now served as interpreters, engineers, and advisors there. Loyalty to humanity, absolute. These weak humans now have allies in every sector we've surveyed, Hay1 observed. They've created a network of friendship that spans the galaxy. The chamber stirred uneasily as more holograms appeared, showing human engineers solving problems that had stumped galactic scientists for centuries. They watched humans jury-rig impossible solutions from spare parts, create new technologies, by combining incompatible systems and achieve results that defied conventional wisdom. Here, Hay1 highlighted one image. Human diplomats turned a trade war between the Korvaxians and the Zenthari into a partnership by finding a solution that benefited both species. And here, another image showed human soldiers defending an alien colony from raiders. They lost half their force protecting civilians from a species they'd never encountered before. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans didn't just fight for survival, they fought for ideals that made no logical sense. They protected the weak, helped their enemies, sacrificed their own interests for abstract concepts like justice and compassion. You see weakness, Hay1 concluded, her voice carrying across the stunned chamber. I see a species that doesn't just fight for survival, they fight for principles we don't understand. They make allies out of enemies, weapons out of tools, and victories out of defeats. You want to give them a reason to unite against us? The chamber fell into profound silence. Every delegate was processing what they had witnessed, trying to reconcile their understanding of galactic civilization with the impossible behavior of these humans. Finally, the Supreme Chancellor spoke, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. Evidences. ... Interesting. But Admiral Kung Ho's point stands. They are still primitive by our standards. Kung Ho smiled triumphantly, his confidence restored. Exactly. Primitive creatures with primitive weapons cannot threaten the hegemony. The invasion fleet launches at dawn. Hay1 closed her presentation crystal with a soft click, the device's glow fading to nothing. She looked around the chamber one final time, seeing the faces of beings who had just witnessed something unprecedented, but refused to understand its significance. Then may the ancestors help us all, she whispered, her words carrying a prophecy that none of them could have imagined. The hegemony warfleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a steel storm unleashed from the depths of space. 200 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destruction, capable of cracking a planet's crust or boiling away its oceans. The sight would have struck fear into the hearts of any civilized species. Admiral Kung Ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable dawn, watching the small blue world grow larger on the main view screen. The planet looked so peaceful from this distance, its white clouds swirling over green continents and blue oceans. It was hard to imagine that this tiny world housed the species that had caused so much concern among the galactic powers. Such a small blue world, he mused to his aide, Commander Jae-sung, who stood at rigid attention beside the command chair. Hard to believe it spawned such troublesome creatures. Commander Jae-sung, his own scales a lighter shade of amber than his. Superiors nodded agreement. The intelligence reports were quite detailed, sir. Primitive technology, but they reproduce at an alarming rate. From the navigation station, Navigator Dong-wook's voice cut through the bridge's quiet hum. Sir, we're picking up human orbital. Defenses powering up. Primitive fusion weapons mostly. Their targeting systems are incredibly basic. Kung Ho's laugh echoed across the bridge, a sound like grinding metal. Fusion weapons against plasma cannons? It's like throwing stones at a starship. Fire at will. Let's end this quickly and return home for the victory celebrations. The first wave of the assault was a symphony of destruction. The hegemony's plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space with brilliant beams of concentrated energy. Human space stations, those crude metal constructions that orbited Earth like primitive satellites, crumbled under the assault, their hulls peeled away like paper in a hurricane, venting atmosphere and debris into the void. The humans' return fire was pathetic by galactic standards. Their missiles moved slowly. Their energy weapons barely scratched the hegemony's advanced shields, and their fighters were destroyed almost as quickly as they launched. Oh, it was exactly what Kung Ho had predicted. A complete mismatch between primitive and advanced technology. Target their communication satellites, Kyumho ordered. Cut off their ability to coordinate. Within minutes, Earth's orbital infrastructure was in ruins. Communication satellites exploded in brilliant flashes. Space stations tumbled toward the planet's surface. And the few human warships that had tried to intercept the fleet were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Phase 2, Kunjo announced. Begin atmospheric insertion. Hundreds of landing craft deployed from the larger ships, their sleek forms cutting through Earth's atmosphere like silver daggers. The humans had no way to stop them. Their air defenses were overwhelmed within minutes, their fighter jets swatted. Aside like insects, New York, London, Tokyo, all primary targets secured, reported Commander Jae-sung, reading from his tactical display. Resistance is minimal, sir. The humans are retreating from major population centers. Kyunho felt the warm glow of victory spreading through his chest. Excellent. Secure the government centers and major industrial sites. We'll have this world pacified by sunset. With great ceremony, he activated the galaxy-wide communication array. This broadcast would reach every corner of civilized space, carrying news of the hegemony's swift victory to potential troublemakers throughout the galaxy. Citizens of the galaxy, his voice boomed across the interstellar networks. Behold the fate of those who oppose the hegemony. Earth has fallen in less than a day. The human threat is ended. Let this serve as a reminder that primitive defiance cannot stand against superior technology and discipline. Across the galaxy, the broadcast was received with satisfaction. The core world, citizens nodded approvingly at their view screens. Even some delegates who had been skeptical of the invasion admitted that the humans had indeed proven to be no match for superior technology. The hegemony had once again demonstrated its overwhelming military superiority. But on the observation ship Silent Witness, positioned at the edge of the solar system to monitor the invasion, Delegate Haewon frowned at her tactical displays. Something was wrong. The patterns she was seeing didn't match any known military doctrine. Computer, analyze human troop movements, she ordered, her voice tight with concern. The ship's artificial intelligence processed the data for several seconds before responding. Analysis complete. Pattern does not match any known military strategy. In the Galactic database, humans appear to be abandoning defensive positions in favor of small unit dispersal. Haewon leaned forward, studying the tactical display more carefully. Show me the details. What she saw made her blood run cold. The humans weren't retreating in the traditional sense. They weren't falling back to fortified positions or attempting to hold strategic locations. Instead, they were ... scattering. Like seeds on the wind, human forces were breaking apart into tiny groups and disappearing into the urban landscapes. Expand the analysis, she ordered. Show me what they're doing in the conquered territories. The computer complied, and Haewon's worst fears were confirmed. The humans weren't retreating, they were adapting. Every skirmish, every defeat, every captured piece of technology was being studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon with shocking speed. In the ruins of New York, human engineers were already stripping components from crashed hegemony fighters. In the London Underground, resistance fighters were modifying captured energy weapons with primitive electronics, somehow making them more efficient than the originals. In Tokyo, civilians were analyzing hegemony communication equipment and learning to intercept military transmissions. They're learning, Haewon whispered, her voice barely audible in the observation ship's quiet bridge. Ancestors preserve us. They're learning faster than we can adapt. She opened a communication channel to Kyungho's flagship, knowing that what she had to say would not be welcome. The Admiral's image appeared on her screen, his expression irritated at being interrupted during his moment of triumph. What is it, Haewon? I'm busy securing our victory and preparing my report to the High Command. It's not secured, she said urgently. Look at your casualty reports from the last 4 hours. Kyungho's expression changed as he accessed the data. His eyes widened as he processed the numbers. Hegemony losses had been minimal at first, exactly as expected, but they were climbing. Not dramatically, but steadily, inexorably. And more concerning, the humans were no longer using just Their own primitive weapons. How are they modifying our technology so quickly? Kyung-ho demanded, his voice rising with anger and confusion. Our equipment has built-in security measures. It should be impossible for primitives to understand our systems. I don't know how they're doing it, Hae-won admitted, but you need to recall your forces. Now, before this gets worse, nonsense. Kyung-ho snapped. A few modified weapons won't change the outcome. We have overwhelming superiority in numbers and technology. But even as he spoke, alerts began flashing across his bridge. The comfortable sounds of victory were being replaced by the urgent beeping of warning systems. Sir, called out Navigator Dong-wook, his voice tight with concern. We're receiving distress calls from Landing Group 7, they're reporting. Unusual resistance. Define unusual, Kyung-ho growled. They say the humans are using our own weapons against us, sir. But they're somehow making them more effective than our original designs. Kyung-ho stared at the tactical display, watching as several of his ground units went silent. The taste of victory was turning to ash in his mouth, replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. Send reinforcements to Landing Group 7, he ordered. It in to get me detailed reports on these weapon modifications. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. But deep in his gut, Admiral Kyung-ho was beginning to suspect that what they were dealing with was something the galaxy had never seen before. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a swift victory, Admiral Kyung-ho stood in his command center. Aboard the inevitable Dawn, surrounded by holographic displays that painted a picture of impossible defeat. The pristine bridge that had once hummed with the confidence of conquest now buzzed with frantic activity as officers scrambled to understand reports that defied every military doctrine in galactic history. Explain this to me again, Kyung-ho, said his voice tight with frustration as he addressed his intelligence officer, Major In-ho. The Major's tentacles writhed nervously, a clear sign of distress among his species. How did the humans turn our own plasma rifles into something that can pierce our battle armor? In-ho's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that indicated deep confusion. They combined the plasma matrix with their primitive chemical explosives, sir. The result is crude by our standards, but devastatingly effective. Our armor was specifically designed to disperse energy weapons, not hybrid projectiles that combine plasma and kinetic impact. Kyung-ho stared at the holographic reconstruction of the weapon. It looked like something a child might build from. Spare parts, with human electronics crudely welded to hegemony energy systems. Yet the battle footage showed these improvised weapons cutting through his elite soldiers like a hot knife through ice. And this? Kyung-ho pointed to another report, his claws clicking against the display controls. They're using our own communication. Frequencies against us? Yes, sir, In-ho confirmed, his tentacles now writhing frantically. They learned to decrypt our battle language in less than a week. Now they're feeding false orders to our ground troops. Yesterday, they convinced 3rd Battalion to attack our own supply depot. The humans somehow mimicked Command Alpha's voice patterns perfectly. The implications were staggering. The hegemony's communication systems had been considered unbreachable. For centuries, the encryption algorithms had been developed by the galaxy's finest minds, tested against every known form of code-breaking technology. Yet these primitive humans had cracked them in days. Commander Jae-soon entered the command center, his expression grim. Sir, we've lost contact with the occupation force in Seoul. Last transmission showed them under attack by ... civilians. Civilians? Kyung-ho's voice cracked with disbelief. How do civilians threaten trained soldiers armed with the finest weapons in the galaxy? They're using urban warfare tactics we've never encountered, sir, Jae-soon replied, activating a new holographic display. They turn their own cities into elaborate traps. They know every tunnel, every building, every weakness. Our soldiers report that the humans appear from nowhere, strike with impossible coordination, then vanish into the urban landscape. The hologram showed grainy footage from soldier helmet cameras. Human resistance fighters moved through the ruins of soul-like ghosts, using maintenance tunnels, subway systems, and building structures that the hegemony forces didn't even know existed. They struck with surgical precision, targeting supply lines, communication nodes, and isolated units. But that's not the worst part, Jae-soon continued. They're not fighting to hold territory like normal species. They're fighting to bleed us dry. Every engagement costs us more than we can afford to lose. Kung Ho studied the tactical displays, trying to make sense of the impossible patterns. Traditional military doctrine called for holding strategic positions, protecting supply lines, and maintaining clear command structures, but the humans seem to have abandoned all conventional wisdom. They're everywhere and nowhere, he muttered. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to be where you expect them to be? Across the solar system, on the observation ship, Asterisk silent. Witness Asterisk, Delegate Hay-1, watched the unfolding disaster with growing horror. Her screen showed a real-time analysis of the conflict, and the data was more disturbing than anything she had witnessed in her decades of studying galactic warfare. Computer, show me the latest intelligence on human command structure, she ordered. The ship's artificial intelligence processed the request for several long seconds before responding, unable to comply. Human command structure appears to be constantly shifting. Leadership emerges organically at all levels. What do you mean by that? Traditional military hierarchy has been abandoned. Humans are forming autonomous cells that coordinate through unknown means. Destruction of leadership nodes has no effect on overall resistance capability. Hay-1 leaned forward, studying the tactical displays more carefully. The humans weren't just adapting to hegemony technology, they were improving it. A captured hegemony fighter had been reverse-engineered and upgraded with human innovations. It's making it 30% more efficient than the original design. But the technology wasn't the most disturbing part. It was the humans themselves. Me the psychological profiles, she ordered. The computer displayed dozens of individual human fighters, each with their own story of impossible resilience. There was a former teacher who had become a master of explosives, a teenage student who had learned to hack hegemony battle computers, and a retired mechanic who was building vehicles that outperformed military designs. They're not just fighting like soldiers, Hay-1 realized. They're fighting like a living organism. Cut off one part, and the rest adapts and grows stronger. The communication array crackled to life, interrupting her analysis. Delegate Hay-1, this is Admiral Kung Ho. I need you to return to Earth. Immediately. What's wrong? She asked, though she suspected she already knew. Everything. Kung Ho's voice was raw with desperation. The humans... they're doing something impossible. They're not just fighting us, they're converting our own troops. Hay-1's blood ran cold. Converting them how? Or talking to them? Kung Ho said, his voice barely above a whisper. Somehow they're convincing hegemony soldiers to defect, not through torture or coercion, but through conversation. We've lost 3 entire companies to defection in the past week. That's impossible, Hay-1 protested. Hegemony conditioning prevents soldiers from abandoning their posts. Psychological programming is absolute. Conditioning is being overridden, Kung Ho replied. Our own soldiers are refusing orders, hiding human civilians, and in some cases, joining their resistance cells. Yesterday, I watched footage of a hegemony squad leader teaching humans how to use our own weapons more effectively. The implications were staggering. For centuries, the hegemony had maintained control through superior technology and absolute discipline. Their soldiers were conditioned from birth to follow orders without question, to see other species as inferior, and to place the hegemony's interests above all else. How do you fight an enemy that turns your own forces against you just by talking to them? Kung Ho continued, his voice breaking with exhaustion. Hay-1 stared at the tactical display, watching red markers representing hegemony forces slowly turn yellow, then green, as entire units went dark or switched sides. The humans weren't just winning through superior tactics or technology. They were doing something no species in galactic history had ever managed. They were making their invaders. Want to help them? Admiral, she said quietly, I think we need to consider the possibility that we've made a terrible mistake. What kind of mistake? We assumed that because the humans are primitive, they would be easy to defeat. But what if their strength doesn't come from their technology? What if it comes from something we don't understand? On the screen, another red marker turned green. Somewhere on Earth, another group of hegemony soldiers had decided that their supposed enemies were worth protecting instead of conquering. 6 months. After what began as the hegemony's most confident military campaign, Delegate HFY stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive crystalline chamber had never held so many representatives at once. Delegates from the furthest reaches of the galaxy had traveled here, all desperate to understand what had happened to the mighty hegemony fleet that was supposed to crush the human threat once and for all. The atmosphere was electric with tension and disbelief. Ancient species that rarely left their homeworlds had sent ambassadors. Warlike races that usually settled disputes with plasma cannons sat alongside. Peaceful traders who had never seen combat. Everyone wanted answers to the impossible question: how had the most powerful military force in galactic history simply vanished? The invasion force has been completely destroyed, HFY announced, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. That followed. It's not through superior firepower, not through advanced technology, but through something we have never encountered before in our recorded history. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. 200 ships, each capable of cracking planets, reduced to nothing by a species that barely understood basic space travel. Just 3 years ago, in the witness chair sat a figure that shocked the assembly even more than HFY's words. Admiral Kyung-ho, once the most feared military commander in hegemony space, now sat quietly with his hands folded. His once proud bearing was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like inner peace. He wore no restraints, no prison uniform, just simple clothes that marked him as a voluntary prisoner. "Tell them what you experienced," HFY said to him gently, her voice carrying the warmth of someone speaking to an old friend rather than a defeated enemy. Kyung-ho stood slowly, movements deliberate and calm. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the military authority that had once commanded fleets across the galaxy. "I came to Earth to destroy humanity," he began, his words hanging in the air like a confession. "I brought the finest soldiers, the most advanced weapons, the most devastating technology our civilization had ever created. I was certain that within days, the human problem would be solved forever." He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces staring back at him. "Instead, I found something I didn't know existed in this universe. A species that fights not for conquest, not for resources, not for territory, but for hope itself." The chamber stirred uneasily. Delegate Sung Min from the Trade Federation, his forearms gesticulating wildly, stood up with obvious skepticism written across his insectoid features. "You were defeated by primitives who barely understand plasma technology," he declared. "This proves nothing, except that the hegemony has grown soft." "Was I defeated?" Kunho's expression remained serene, almost enlightened. "Let me tell you what really happened. My soldiers were fed by human civilians, even as we occupied their cities. When our supply lines were cut, humans brought food to our starving troops. Human engineers worked alongside our technicians to repair damaged equipment. Not ours, but theirs, to save lives on both sides." The chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. "This wasn't how military campaigns were supposed to work. When my troops were wounded," Kunho continued, "human medics treated them with the same care as their own soldiers. I watched a human doctor work for 18 hours straight to save the life of a hegemony soldier who had been shooting at her people just hours before." Propaganda scoffed Delegate Wu Jin from his hovering chair, his tentacles waving dismissively. "You were obviously brainwashed by some form of human mind control technology." "Then explain this," HFY said, activating the chamber's main display. The massive holographic projector came to life, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Bright points of light began appearing across the star chart, each one representing human activity. "In the past 6 months, humanity has established formal diplomatic relations with 47 different species," she announced. "They've shared their technological innovations freely, without patents or licensing fees. They've offered trade agreements that benefit their partners more than themselves. They've provided military assistance to anyone who asked, expecting nothing in return. The display zoomed in to show specific examples. Human ships worked alongside Zeltharian science. Vessels, their crews collaborating on projects that neither species could have completed alone. Human diplomats sat in meditation chambers with the crystal-based Harmony Collective, learning their complex emotional communication methods. Human soldiers stood guard over Korvaxian mining colonies, protecting them from the same void pirates, who had once attacked human settlements. They didn't just defeat us, Kyung-ho said, his voice filled with wonder. They offered us something better than victory. They offered us friendship. Delegate Sung Min slammed his primary hand against his chair's armrest. This is ridiculous. No species in galactic history has been that altruistic. It goes against every principle of evolutionary survival, doesn't it? Haewon's voice was quiet but carried clearly across the chamber. Ask the refugees they've housed in their colonies. Ask the species they've defended from pirates and raiders. It's about the technologies they've shared freely instead of hoarding for military advantage. The chamber's massive doors suddenly opened, with a deep, resonant chime. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the assembly turned toward the entrance. A figure walked in with quiet confidence, and the sight sent shockwaves through the gathered delegates. It was a human female. Young by their species standards, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style and calm, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore no military uniform, no ceremonial robes, no symbols of power, just simple, practical clothing that spoke of someone more interested in function than appearance. "I am Saw Young Park," she said, her voice carrying easily through the massive chamber despite its size. "I represent the Earth's diplomatic corps. We come not as conquerors, not as supplicants, but as friends, seeking friendship." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs and excited conversations in dozens of languages. Human here in the very heart of galactic civilization, speaking as an equal to species that had ruled the stars for millennia. "How did you get here?" demanded the Supreme Chancellor, his ancient voice crackling with surprise. "Our sensors monitor every approach to this system." "We were invited," So-Young replied with a gentle smile, "by the crew of the observation ship Silent Witness. Delegate Haewon believed it was time for us to meet face to face, to speak as civilized beings rather than through the filter of fear and misunderstanding." "Impossible," Delegate Sungmin sputtered, his compound eyes blinking rapidly. "Our sensors would have detected any human vessel. Your technology is too primitive to evade our detection systems." "Your sensors did detect us," Saw Young interrupted, gently, her tone patient and understanding. "We've been here for 3 days, waiting respectfully outside your system. We've been monitoring your discussions about whether to fear us or destroy us. We hoped you might eventually be ready to simply talk to us." Haewon stepped forward, her silver hair catching the chamber's light. "The humans didn't just defeat our invasion. They've changed the very nature of galactic civilization. They've shown us that true strength isn't about who can destroy whom. It's about who can build what, create what, inspire what. We come offering partnership," Saw-Young continued, addressing the entire assembly. "Our scientists would like to collaborate with yours to solve problems that plague all our species. Our engineers would like to learn from your expertise, while sharing our own innovations. Our diplomats would like to help resolve conflicts peacefully. And our soldiers would like to help protect those who cannot protect themselves." The chamber fell into absolute silence. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. "And if we refuse?" asked the Chancellor. So-Young's expression remained calm and peaceful. "Then we'll respect your decision and continue working with those species who are willing to accept our friendship, but the offer will remain open, always." The chamber fell silent once more. Finally, Admiral Kung-ho spoke, his voice carrying the authority of experience rather than rank. "They don't seek to rule us. They don't want to control us. They seek to understand us. And in doing so, they've accomplished what no military force in galactic history ever could. They've united the galaxy not through fear, but through hope." As if summoned by his words, the chamber doors opened again. Representatives from dozens of species began entering, Zeltharians with their translucent blue skin, Mechanical Void Runners, Trade Federation merchants, even former hegemony commanders still wearing their military insignia, all had come to support the human diplomatic mission. The question before us, Hay once said, addressing the council with quiet dignity, is not whether humanity is dangerous. The question is whether we are brave enough to accept their friendship. The vote was unanimous. As the session ended and species after species approached the human delegation to offer partnership, Hay-One found herself standing next to Saw Young in the chamber's aftermath. "How did you know?" Hay-One asked quietly. "How did you know we would accept?" So Young smiled, and in that smile was all the hope and determination that had transformed a galaxy. "We didn't know," she admitted, "but we hoped. And sometimes hope is enough to change everything." Outside the Great Chamber, human ships waited in formation. Not as conquerors preparing for battle, but as partners ready to begin a new age of galactic cooperation. The invasion had ended not with humanity's defeat, but with their victory. A victory that had transformed everyone it touched. The end.